One day, due to a short circuit, my entire house burned down to ashes. Within a few hours, I lost everything I had worked for. My savings, my husband's memories, my peace. With trembling hands, I went to my daughter's door, just to ask if I could stay with her for a few days. But the answer she gave shattered my world. In that moment, I realized the fire hadn't only consumed my home, it had burned my faith as well. That day, I understood one thing: in this world, no one truly stays yours forever. My name is Donna, and I'm 51 years old. I spent most of my life teaching children at a small public school in Salem, Virginia. Teaching was never just a job for me, it was a calling, something that gave my life rhythm after my husband passed away 6 years ago. I lived alone in the little wooden house we built together, a place that carried every laughter, every photograph, and every echo of the man I once loved. My days were quiet but meaningful, mornings with black coffee and birds outside my window, afternoons in a classroom full of chatter, and nights spent reading the same novels we used to love together. People often said I had a peaceful life, and I suppose they were right, until peace turned into silence. My daughter, Laura, was my only child, the center of my heart. After her marriage to Adam, she moved to another city. At first, she called every week, then every month, and then the calls stopped altogether. I told myself she was busy, building a life of her own, but deep down I missed her voice, her good morning mom, the way she used to fill the house with laughter. I used to tell myself, she'll come visit next month. But next month never came. That's the strange thing about loneliness, it doesn't arrive all at once, it slips into your life slowly, like dust collecting on an old piano. I tried to ignore it by focusing on my students, baking cookies for neighbors, pretending I didn't hear the creak of the empty hallway at night. But sometimes, when the wind blew hard against my windows, I would whisper into the dark, "I hope you're happy, Laura." I had no idea that life was preparing to test that hope in the cruelest way possible. It happened on a stormy night I'll never forget. The rain outside was pounding hard against the windows, and thunder rolled across the Virginia sky like an angry god. I had stayed late grading my students' essays. I always told them that words could change their lives, but that night, it was fire that changed mine. I remember the moment clearly. The smell of smoke, faint at first, then sharp and suffocating. I looked up and saw a thin line of orange creeping along the ceiling near the kitchen. For a second I froze, thinking it was just a reflection from lightning. But then I heard it, the crackle of burning wood. The short circuit had started somewhere near the fuse box. The fire spread fast, faster than I could comprehend. I tried to grab the photo album from the living room shelf, the one filled with pictures of my husband and Laura when she was a baby, but the heat pushed me back. Flames danced up the walls, devouring everything we had built together. I could barely see through the smoke. My throat burned, my eyes watered. I coughed, stumbled, and somehow found my way to the front door. When I turned for one last look, my entire life was glowing behind me, glowing, then collapsing. Outside, I stood barefoot in the rain, watching the roof cave in. It wasn't just wood and furniture turning to ash, it was decades of memories. The smell of burnt fabric, the sound of splintering beams, the red reflection on the wet road, they all fused into one image I'll never erase. Fire trucks arrived minutes later, but it was already over. A neighbor handed me a blanket, someone else called my name, but their voices sounded distant, like echoes from another world. When the flames finally died down, only smoke remained, a ghostly reminder of everything I'd lost. I had nowhere to go, no family nearby, no savings except what little was left in my purse. My hands shook as I held my wedding ring, still warm from the fire's heat. I told myself, it's just a house. I'm still alive. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. Because what is life, when everything that made it home is gone? By sunrise, the firefighters told me it was unsafe to stay. I looked back one last time, whispered goodbye to the ashes, and began walking toward the bus station. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there anymore. By the next afternoon, I was sitting on a Greyhound bus headed to my daughter's town. I hadn't eaten since the night before, but hunger didn't matter. Only the thought that maybe Laura would open the door with tears in her eyes and say, "Mom, you're safe now." That small hope kept me breathing. When the bus stopped, I clutched my small handbag, the only thing I had left, and walked through the quiet, suburban streets until I reached her new house. It looked beautiful, white porch, flower pots, and a shiny car in the driveway. I smiled weakly, thinking, she made it. She really made it. I rang the bell. The sound echoed longer than it should have. When the door opened, Laura's eyes widened in shock. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Her voice wasn't warm, it was startled, almost defensive. "Sweetheart," I said, my throat tightening, "there was a fire. My house is gone. I didn't know where else to go. I just need a few days until I can find something." Before she could answer, Adam appeared behind her, dressed neatly as always, holding a coffee mug. He looked at me, then at her, and said softly but firmly, "Laura, maybe this isn't the best time." I felt my heart stumble. Laura turned back toward me, her face pale. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "we just moved in here. We don't have an extra room yet, and with Adam working from home, things are a little complicated." I blinked, not understanding. "I can sleep on the couch. I just need a roof for a few nights. I won't be any trouble." Adam sighed. "Dana, it's not about trouble. We just need our space right now." Those words, our space, cut deeper than the fire. I looked at Laura, searching her face for a sign of love, of guilt, of anything that might make this less cruel. But she avoided my eyes. Her hand was still on the doorknob, ready to close it. "I understand," I whispered. "I'm sorry for showing up like this." "Mom, please don't take it the wrong way," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I won't," I lied. When I turned away, the wind was cold, and my shoes were soaked from the puddles. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I would break down on her porch. I kept walking, whispering to myself, "She's just overwhelmed. She'll call me tomorrow." But deep inside, something already knew the truth, that tomorrow would come and go, and that door would stay closed. I walked for what felt like hours, aimlessly, with no destination in mind. My clothes were still damp from the night before, and every step seemed heavier than the last. The world around me looked blurry. Maybe from the fog, or maybe from the tears that refused to fall. The streets were quiet, lined with perfect houses, every porch glowing with warmth and safety. It was strange how peaceful everything looked when your own life had just turned to ashes. I passed a coffee shop, the smell of fresh bread drifting out, but I didn't have the courage to walk in. I didn't even have enough money to pretend I belonged there. Eventually, I reached the bus station on the edge of town. The benches were cold metal, slick from the rain. I sat down, clutching my handbag to my chest like it still carried something valuable, but all it held were a few burned papers, my husband's wedding ring, and an old photo album half soaked in water. I opened it, turning the wrinkled pages slowly, tracing the faces that no longer existed in the real world. My husband's smile, Laura's baby pictures, the family that once felt eternal. Then, tucked between the last few pages, I saw something I hadn't noticed in years, an old envelope, yellowed and soft at the edges. My breath caught when I saw the name written in blue ink, James Reed. For a moment, the sound of that name pulled me out of the present and into the warmth of the past. I remembered college days, the old campus in Charlottesville, late-night coffee runs, laughter under the library steps. James was my first love. He wasn't rich or ambitious, but he had a kindness that felt rare even then. He used to say, "Dana, some people chase success, I just want peace, and you." I smiled through the tears as I opened the letter. The paper was fragile, but the words were clear. "If you ever lose your roof, remember, my heart never had one, and it's always open for you." I pressed the letter to my chest, my hands trembling. After all these years, how strange that his words had survived when everything else had burned. I stared at the phone booth across the street. For a long time, I just sat there, debating whether to dial the number scribbled at the bottom of the page. It was probably disconnected. After all, 20 years had passed. But something inside me, maybe desperation, maybe faith, told me to try. I stood up, walked across the street, and stepped into the booth. My fingers shook as I picked up the receiver and dialed. Each ring echoed louder in my ears, and just as I was about to hang up, I heard a voice. "Hello." It was warm, deep, and familiar, a voice I never thought I'd hear again. "James." I whispered. There was a pause, then a quiet, trembling reply. Dana? Is that really you? When I heard his voice, my heart almost stopped. It was the same gentle tone I remembered from decades ago, calm, steady, and full of warmth. Dana, he said again, almost afraid that I'd vanish if he spoke too loudly. For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. All the years, all the memories, came flooding back at once. Finally, I managed to whisper, "It's me, James. After all these years, it's really me." He exhaled sharply, like someone who had been holding his breath for 20 years. "Where are you? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tightening with concern. I hesitated before answering, embarrassed by my truth. I'm at a bus station. My house burned down. I went to Laura's place, but I stopped mid-sentence, unable to finish. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. I could almost feel his anger, not at me, but at what life had done. "Text me your location," he said, his voice firm now. "Don't move. I'm coming." "James, no, please. It's late, you don't have to." "Dana," he interrupted softly, "for 20 years I've wanted to keep a promise. Don't take that from me." It took him less than 3 hours to reach me. I remember the headlights cutting through the fog and the sound of a car door slamming shut. Then he was there, standing in front of me. Older, yes, with silver hair and a few more lines around his eyes, but the same man I'd once loved. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than pain. "Come on," he said gently, wrapping his coat around my shoulders. "You're safe now." When we got into his car, I looked out at the empty streets. Everything I'd known was gone, but somehow, sitting beside him, I felt like I was finally heading home, not to a house, but to a heart that had waited patiently for me to return. The next morning, I woke up to the faint smell of coffee and the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. For a moment, I didn't know where I was, until I saw the soft beige curtains, the tidy room, and the framed photographs on the wall. Everything in that house felt peaceful, warm, and real. I had slept under a proper roof for the first time since the fire, and as I sat up, I saw a folded blanket at my feet and a note on the bedside table. In neat handwriting, it read, "Good morning, Dana. The coffee's ready. James." I went downstairs slowly, unsure what to say or how to thank him for what he'd done. He was standing by the window, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. When he turned and saw me, that same kind smile crossed his face. "You still take it with cream, right?" he asked. I couldn't help but laugh through the heaviness inside me. "You remember that?" I said. He nodded. "I remember everything." Over breakfast, he told me how his life had unfolded after college. How he'd started teaching, then founded a small private school for underprivileged children that eventually became one of the most respected institutions in the state. He never married. "I kept busy," he said with a small shrug. "But some things, you just don't move past." I knew exactly what he meant. In the days that followed, I stayed in his guest room while trying to regain some balance. He never made me feel like a guest, though. He gave me space to grieve, to breathe, and to start feeling human again. Every evening, we'd walk through his garden filled with maple trees and wildflowers. He would tell me stories about his students. How one boy went from failing every class to winning a scholarship, how another girl dreamed of becoming a teacher like me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet joy stirring inside me. One evening, as the sunset turned the sky golden, he stopped walking and looked at me. "Dana," he said softly, "I built this life alone, but it always felt unfinished. When I saw you sitting at that bus station, I realized why." His voice trembled slightly as he continued, "I don't want to spend another year pretending I'm content without you. Stay. Not as a guest. Stay as my partner, my wife, my home." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The years, the distance, the pain, they all melted under the weight of his sincerity. My eyes filled with tears, and all I could manage was a whisper, "Yes, James. I'll stay." We married quietly 2 months later in his garden, surrounded by a handful of friends and children from his school. There were no grand vows, no lavish ceremonies, just 2 souls who had lost everything and somehow found each other again. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, he said, You didn't just survive the fire, Donna. You walked out of it reborn. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The months that followed were the gentlest of my life. James and I turned our shared pain into purpose, deciding to create something meaningful together. Something that could heal others the way fate had healed us. One morning, while sitting on the porch with our coffee, James said, "You know, there are so many kids in this town who've been through more than any child should. Some of them have no home, no family, no hope. I think we can give them what we never had back then, a second chance." That phrase stuck with me, a second chance. It echoed in my heart all day, and that evening, when I was writing lesson plans for his school, I wrote it at the top of the page, the second chance. It felt right, like it wasn't just a name, but a reflection of who we were. Within weeks, we turned a small, unused building behind the main school into a special learning center for children who had dropped out, struggled with grief, or had nowhere else to go. I remember cleaning the dusty windows, painting the walls a soft cream color, and hanging little paper stars the children made out of recycled books. James handled the funding and paperwork. I handled the heart, the teaching, the mentoring, the listening. Every morning, when I walked into that classroom and saw their faces, frightened, curious, full of untold stories, I saw a piece of my old self. A girl who once believed she'd lost everything but still showed up the next day to try again. I taught them literature, but what I really tried to teach was courage. The courage to begin again, no matter how broken life leaves you. One day, a journalist visited the school to write an article about our program. During the interview, she asked, "Mrs. Reed, what inspired the name The Second Chance?" I smiled, looking at the children playing outside through the window, and said softly, "Because life didn't end the day my house burned down, it began anew." The article went viral in our small town. Donations started coming in. Volunteers joined. The local newspaper called our school a miracle born from ashes. I often stood by the window after class, watching James talking with the students, and thought how strange life was, how it takes everything from you just to give you what you truly need. In those moments, surrounded by laughter and sunlight, I realized I was no longer the woman who had stood barefoot in the rain, watching her house burn. I had rebuilt myself, brick by brick, with patience, hope, and love. But destiny, it seems, wasn't done teaching me. Because one quiet autumn evening, another knock came at my door, one that would test everything I had learned about forgiveness. It was late October when it happened. The air smelled like dry leaves and wood smoke, and the hills behind our house were painted in gold. I had just finished closing the classroom for the day when I heard a knock at our front door. It was gentle but desperate, the kind of knock that carries a story. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. There she was, Laura. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen from crying, her clothes wrinkled like she'd been on the road for hours. She clutched a small suitcase against her chest, and before I could say a word, tears started spilling down her face. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "Adam left me. We had a terrible fight. He said he was done. I tried everything, but he's gone. I didn't know where else to go." For a moment, I couldn't move. The world around me went still. Only the sound of the wind and the faint hum of the porch light remained. James came to stand quietly beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, letting me decide. I looked at her, my only child, and saw the same eyes that had once looked up at me from a crib, the same voice that had once called me Mommy with joy. But I also saw something else, the memory of that rainy day when I had stood on her porch, begging for a place to stay, and she had turned me away. She stepped forward, reaching out. "Please, Mom. Just for a while. I can't face anyone else. I have nothing left." Her words echoed mine. Almost the same plea I'd made months ago. For a second, my heart wanted to forgive instantly, to take her in and hold her like I used to. But then I remembered that pain, standing alone in the rain, feeling unwanted, unloved. I took a deep breath and asked softly, "Do you remember what you said to me that day, Laura?" Her eyes dropped. "Mom, please don't." "You told me there was no space," I continued quietly. "That you didn't have room for me." She started sobbing harder now, her voice trembling. "I was wrong, Mom. I was stupid. I thought I had everything, a home, a marriage, a life, but I didn't realize how much I needed you until I lost it all." Behind me, James whispered gently, Donna. But I raised my hand slightly, signaling him to let me speak. My heart was breaking, but I knew this was the moment that would define both our lives, hers and mine. Laura, I said slowly, I've forgiven you long ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. When you closed that door on me, I learned to open one for myself. You need to do the same now. She looked up, eyes wide, a mix of pain and disbelief. You're turning me away? I shook my head. No. I'm teaching you what life never did, how to stand again, even when no one opens the door for you. Laura stood frozen on the porch, her tears falling soundlessly as the cool evening breeze moved through the maple trees. I could see the disbelief on her face, the same disbelief I once felt outside her home, when my own heart was collapsing under the weight of rejection. Every part of me wanted to reach out, to hold her, to say that everything would be fine. But the truth was, that kind of comfort had never taught either of us how to survive. Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling, I don't have anyone else. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. Neither did I, Laura. And that's when I learned something, that the moment you think you have no one left, that's when you meet yourself for the first time. She shook her head, crying harder. I was scared, Mom. Adam said he needed space, and I thought I was doing the right thing keeping you away back then. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said gently. But love isn't about meaning well. It's about showing up when someone needs you. I came to your door with nothing, not a single thing to my name, and you shut me out because you were worried about your comfort. Now you stand where I once stood. Tell me, Laura, what have you learned? She didn't answer. She just lowered her head, sobbing quietly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was some cash and a small card with an address. There's a women's shelter downtown, I said softly. They'll help you get back on your feet. I'll cover the first few months of rent once you find a place. You're not alone, but you have to start over, the same way I did. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. You really won't let me stay? I stepped forward, placing my hand gently on her cheek. I taught you to be someone's strength, I said, my voice calm but firm, but you only learned to lean on others. Now, it's time you stand on your own, just like I did. Her eyes met mine, full of pain, understanding, and a faint spark of something I hadn't seen in years, humility. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. I kissed her forehead and whispered, You're stronger than you think, Laura. This is not punishment, it's your beginning. As she turned to leave, suitcase in hand, I stood there watching her walk down the same road I once had. The roles were reversed, but the lesson was the same. The fire that had destroyed my home had also built the woman I'd become. And now, maybe, it would do the same for her, in a different way. When I closed the door, my heart ached, but there was peace in it too. Because for the first time, I didn't act out of guilt or weakness. I acted out of love, the kind that lets go so the other person can grow. That evening, after Laura had gone, the house fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the cold emptiness I had known before, but a calm that felt earned. I walked out to the porch, where the sun was sinking behind the hills, spilling gold across the sky. The air smelled of pine and fresh earth. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the laughter of children drifting from the second chance schoolyard. James came outside carrying 2 cups of tea. He didn't ask what had happened, he already knew. He handed me a cup and sat beside me. For a long time, we didn't speak. We just watched the light fade and the world settle into stillness. Finally, he said quietly, You did the right thing, Donna. I let out a slow breath. It didn't feel right, James. Watching her walk away like that. It hurt. He looked at me with that patient kindness I had come to know so well. Sometimes love isn't about pulling people close. It's about knowing when to let them find their own path. You didn't close the door on her, you opened it toward her strength. I smiled faintly, tracing the rim of my cup. Funny, isn't it? The fire that destroyed my home ended up rebuilding my heart. He nodded. That's because it didn't burn you down, Donna. It refined you. As the last light of the day dipped below the horizon, I glanced toward the small wooden sign near the school gate. The children had painted it themselves, each letter crooked but full of color. The Second Chance, founded by Donna and James Reed, for all those who were once forgotten. I stood up, feeling the cool evening air wrap around me, and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. The world had taken everything from me once. My home, my comfort, even my faith in love. But it had given it all back in a way I never expected. Through loss I found purpose, through pain I found peace. James reached for my hand, and we stood there together, watching the stars emerge one by one. Somewhere in that soft twilight, I felt my heart finally settle. Not in regret, not in longing, but in quiet, complete peace. I thought of Laura, wherever she was, and whispered into the night, "You'll be all right, my daughter. The same fire that once destroyed me will light your way home someday." And with that thought, I closed my eyes and smiled, because for the first time in a very long time, I truly felt home. Before I end my story, I just want to thank you for listening to my journey. If my story touched your heart or reminded you of something in your own life, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I always love reading where you're watching from and how these stories connect with you. Your words mean more than you know.